Starting at version 3.03, we can run our jobs on a cluster in Amazon's Elastic Compute Cloud. So I'm going to show you how to launch a cluster using a CloudFormation launch template. First, I'm going to start with SYMMIC, and I'm going to open the template that I want to solve. This is a FET with 5 million unknowns. So to do that, I'm going to use a remote run dialog. And here I want to access a cluster and use parallel computation to speed up the simulation. So I have to start a cluster, and the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use CloudFormation. So I've already subscribed to SYMMIC in the cloud, and I can just say create stack and then use the template that CapeSim provides at this S3 bucket, which is public access. You can also download it from our downloads area. I click next, then I enter the name of a stack. Every stack has to be given a name. I say what availability zone I'm going to use. I select the number of compute nodes. Here the default is 3, so that plus the master node would give me 4 nodes in my cluster. This is the machine type that it is suggesting, but you have the opportunity to choose from a lot of different machine types. I'll just take the default for this example. I need to use a public-private key pair that's already been defined in my AWS account for establishing SSH connections with the cluster. I can set the master size volume. It can be smaller than this for this problem size. It's not very big. I'm just solving for steady state, so the output file is not going to be very large. To set the SSH location, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Google and I'm going to just type in my IP address, and then I'm going to copy this by entering that in this SSH location and appending 32 to it. Means that the only IP address that will be allowed SSH access to my cluster will be my desktop machine. For the VPC address, I'll just use this, which is the default. So I click next. I don't need to configure any stack options. I can just ignore those. And in the review page of the wizard, I can just scroll down to the bottom and say create stack. It immediately switched to displaying the stack details and the events in the events tab. So if I refresh this, I'll see that the events are proceeding correctly. It started creating the internet gateway, the placement group, the VPC, and so on. And if I periodically press the refresh button, I'll see the progress, but it's going to take a minute or so until it actually gets everything, all the resources created for that. So now it's completed creating the entire stack, and we can look at the outputs tab, and here's some key values for our parameters that we need to probably be aware of. So the instance type, the number of cores, how much RAM we have per instance, how many instances there are, in this case 4, the interconnect speed, the private key that we need to use to connect from our desktop to the instance, and the public IP address of the master node. So I'm just going to copy this because I'm going to use this in SYMMIC to connect. So in the remote run dialog, I'm going to paste in that IP address, and then I'm going to switch to an AWS cluster. It automatically fills in the username and the working directory. I need to set the private key file, and then I'm ready to connect. So when I connect to the instance, it not only establishes a connection, but it also uploads my private key file onto the instance so that it can use that to communicate between the nodes in the cluster, and then it also downloads a host file which it calls IP addresses and fills that in here. So I'm all set to go and running on my cluster. I just need to say how many processes I want to use. So for this cluster, I'll say let's use 64 and use 16 on each of the 4 instances, and then we'll launch the job. After it uploads the template, it starts running the job using MPI exec and using PETSI as the solver. Now it's done. It only took 30 seconds to solve that 5 million unknown problem, and after it solved it, it immediately started downloading it onto my desktop machine. So now that the remote run is complete, I'll just load the solution and display it. And I'll go back to my stack, select it, and delete it so I don't incur any more charges in AWS.